Welcome back to FM Jeeping. My name is Mark, and today we're going to be installing the PCS Big Bore Hydro Assist Kit on this JK right here. So I'm kind of jumping out of my realm here. I haven't really worked on many JKs before, but I have done a couple Hydro Assist setups, so we're going to give this one a shot. So I have everything here that I pretty much need, with the exception of the steering box, which is still in the Jeep. It's pretty heavy. I don't really have room on the table for it. So I got a pump bracket so I can mount it to the engine, a inline cooler, return and feed lines, an anti-splash remote the main reservoir bracket, the new reservoir belt pump fluid. I have the tie rod clamp, and then we have the hydraulic cylinder, times, some mounting hardware, lines, and then the non-welding bolt-on bracket. So let's get into it. It looks like I'm going to start with the pump, do all the lines first, and then kind of work my way from the top down. Alright, so I'm going to move the air intake here. Here's the power steering res, and the power steering pump should be down in this area right below here. So first things first, we got to get this belt off so we can get the power steering pump out. The trick with the newer JKs, the ones with the hydraulic dampener at the bottom, is you got to throw in a 1/2-inch socket or something there. I've got this weird like breaker bar set up, and it takes a ton of force, and you got to go nice and slow just to back it off. Now I got to put you down so I have enough. Maybe I might be able to deal with it. Okay. Actually, that wasn't that bad. So I'm going to go ahead and crack the high pressure with an 18 millimeter, and then I'm going to unclamp the return line and just let this system bleed out so I can start installing the new stuff. There's going to be 3 bolts holding this whole bracket and pump on. One here, one right here, and then one on the underside, and then it looks like there's an electrical connection just used as a kind of like a holder. So I'm going to pry that off. This whole pump should come off right after this. All right. Oh, there's another electrical connection on the back here. I'm just going to pop this off. All right, there we go. All right, there's the old pump. There. So, little suggestion. In the directions, it tells you to pop all the lines first, then go ahead and remove the pump. I would actually honestly go under the rig, remove that lower mounting point or the lower mounting bolt for the pump first, and then crack all your lines, so that way you don't got to go underneath the rig and have fluid falling all over you. But that's just my personal opinion. Follow the instructions if you want. Ooh, pretty. So I'm going to go ahead and install the pump to the bracket. There are two tapped holes here, and this is the upper. So, and I believe they do it so it can only really go on one way. That's not the way, so let's try a different way. That's not the way either. So, there we go. And that looks about right. So they supply hardware, and that's what we're going to use. Just a light dab of some blue. Doesn't recommend this, but we're gonna give it a go. That looks right. Let's remove this tag. Should be good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this back in the Jeep. Factory locations, there's 2 on the top, 1 on the bottom. They do supply the hardware. I might just dab a little bit of blue or some light thread locker, not the red, but just a little something just to hold it in so that way it doesn't back out. Okay. All right, so I was able to get the pump lined up. That was kind of a pain, but once you get it, it goes in pretty smooth. And I'm going to go ahead and tighten up the 3 13mm bolts, and we'll be right back. So now that I'm working on the front and top of the engine, I'm going to go ahead and run the new supplied belt. I believe the belt might be a little bit longer than the factory because the PSC's pulley is a little bit bigger. It looks like to do the JK Serp belt, I got to take off the alternator and the alternator bracket because it looks like the belt is feeded through the alternator bracket. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. First, disconnect the battery, and then I'm going to actually undo the alternator and probably just pull it up and place it over here on the engine somewhere. I just don't want to arc anything out. And then I'll have full access to the alternator bracket. I can remove that, probably just back about an inch, get the new belt or the old belt out, the new belt in. All right, so I got the pump installed, belt fully done. I'm going to go ahead, remove this factory reservoir, and the new upgraded PSC res is going to go right in this area. So once we move the res, we're going to go ahead and install the PSC reservoir. There's two parts here. There's a huge one and a much smaller one. The big, gigantic one goes to this hose right here. And this goes off one of the other fittings that we'll be installing down the line. This comes with a bracket. We're going to go ahead and mount it on the underside. There's two ways to do it. There's the back side here and the underside. I believe this is set up for more universal res and that they have different hoses and mounting points for universal applications. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go move the factory res and install this. That's out of the way. Let's go ahead and remove this bracket. It's a 10mm as well. Alright, it's out of the way. So before I install this on the res, I just wanted to test everything out, and it looks like they include this bracket, this little spacer here. There's this little hole in the factory mounting spot. This is going to level it out and not kind of pulling the bracket either way. So I'm going to go ahead, attach this mounting bracket to the res, and then install it into the vehicle. Let's get this out of there. I put the little spacer in here. This is about the same height as the depth of the bracket. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the reservoir in. I might have to slightly push it over because I did dry test this, and it is very close to the rad and the overflow hose. So this has a little bit of play in it. You can push it and gain probably about an eighth of an inch or so clearance between the res and this, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So as you see, I tightened it up. It actually pushed it against here. So what I'm going to do is loosen this up a little bit, push against it, and we got a little bit more clearance. Now if you do need to take it off, it's not rubbing on the radiator. So right now I'm at a point where I can work on the steering box. I'm going to go ahead and ratchet strap the steering wheel down to the seat so it won't move when I disconnect the steering column. I don't want to mess up the clock spring or the directional mechanism. Then get back under the Jeep. The track bar is in the way. I'm going to go ahead and drop the track bar. I might even lift the Jeep up a little bit and to take some of the tension off the track bar. Drop the track bar, give me a little bit more room to work. I have the power steering lines, the feed and the return on the top of the box. I got to get those off. Then I have, I believe, 4 18mm bolts here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and the box will pretty much come out. I do also need to remove the drag link as well. So that's kind of all encompassing. With the track bar dropped, I'm now going to focus on all the inputs and outputs of the steering box. Now, the lines on top, the feed and return lines are right over in this area right here. Hard to see. What's typically here is this overflow bottle. I went ahead and removed it. It's held in with one of these retaining clips. And there's a spot in the shroud for the radiator fan that's cut. It literally slides in, and then that retaining clip just keeps it from being able to pop out. And that's it. There's one on the top and one on the bottom, so that way it locks to the shroud. But with that out of the way, it gives us all the room in the world to get these feed lines out of here, which is what I'm going to do now. Ooh, that was a fight. So the high pressure line fought me pretty much the entire way. There looks like there's looks like there's two 10mm bolts with mounting hardware for the line that goes across the front of the lower cross member here. I'm going to go ahead and take that out, and this high pressure line should come right out of the vehicle. Okay. Come on, you can do it. With your feed lines done, we can focus on the input shaft on the steering column, which is right, hopefully you can see that in the video, but it's right there. On this one, it's a 13mm. What you want to do is, before you lock your steering wheel down, just put it in a place where you can get to it. If it's facing the frame or the shock tower, you most likely aren't going to get it. You're going to want to turn it a little bit. Mine just happens to be facing down, which is perfect for me. So when you go to separate the input shaft, or the collapsible input shaft, from the steering column into the box, there's one bolt. On this Jeep, it's a 13mm, and it can only go on one way, but it's still a good idea to lock your steering wheel down with a strap, so that way it doesn't kind of go crazy and spin and throw off your steering mechanisms and your turn signals and whatnot. Something to also consider, I used a pry bar, a big old pry bar. Probably could have used 2 to separate the column from, or the collar on the steering shaft from the box. It should go with a little bit of resistance. If it's bound up, and no matter how much prying you do, it doesn't come off, your steering shaft is probably seized. You might want to shoot it with some PB Blast, or wear telescopes just to kind of break it free, and you might want to consider replacing that. Those are supposed to move with a little bit of resistance, but smoothly. This one is a-okay. So now, with the steering shaft disconnected, the lines disconnected, I'm going to go ahead and rip off the pitman arm. I'm sorry, I'm not going to rip off the pitman arm. This kit comes with a pitman arm. So I'm going to use the one that came with the kit. So if I had to reuse my factory one for whatever reason, I would, at this point is when I would take it off with a pitman arm puller. But since I don't have to do that, I can take it all out in one assembly. I'm going to go ahead, drop the pitman arm, undo the 4 bolts, and the steering shaft should be sitting in my arm here in a minute. All right, factory box, PSC box, no comparison. PSC box is huge compared to the factory one. Also, if you look at the sector shafts, the sector shaft is probably about 20% larger on the PSC box than the factory. For the ease of installment, I'm going to go ahead and loosely put on the pitman arm, get it splined in to match the factory one as much as possible, and kind of, you know, hand tighten it so that way I have something else to hold on to when I'm putting the steering box back into the rig. The only thing it does is it adds a little bit of weight, but once I get it up relative in position, I can start a bolt or two to kind of aid me in that. And something I was just reading, it looks like when we go to mount this, we're going to go ahead and reuse the factory bolts here, and then there are provided bigger, stronger bolts. There's some difference here that go in these two here. So if you look at the box faces, this is the input shaft from the steering column. The frame, this mounts on the inside of the frame. So this is actually the 2 bolts that are in the shock tower area, and then these 2 are in front of the shock tower area. These 2 get the bolts from PSC. These 2 get the factory bolts. So I went ahead and threw on the pitman arm. There's only 4 ways you can clock this. You just need to make sure that the steering box is lined up from the factory. Now, PSC puts a red line on the housing and then on the sector shaft, and those need to be lined up so that way you can be straight. The box is centered. So that way the wheel should be centered, the box is centered. This pitman arm should be basically the same way it comes off the factory box, as long as the wheels are centered on the vehicle when you take the box off, which mine are. So I went ahead, threw the pitman arm on, I hand tightened it. I'm going to tighten it later. Oh my goodness, that's heavy. This thing is kind of pissing me off. Alright, let's try that again. But this time, let's not drop anything. Oh, come on! You horse's ass, I had you in there. Whoo, shit. Oh my God, this thing's heavy. So new day, same hot weather. Just a quick update. I was able to get the box up into place and bolt it up. I did have to use some help. Luckily my father came by just in time to help me kind of manhandle the thing up. Otherwise I was going to suffer heat stroke and a hernia. But basically, I would highly suggest having 2 people to put that box up there, because that box weighs a ton. And if you're using one arm to hold it up and the other arm to feed the nuts through, or the bolts through, you're going to hurt yourself, or you're not going to accomplish what you want. In fact, I had mine, it fell once or twice. I was able to catch it to keep it from falling all the way to the ground. But it's heavy, it's awkward. Definitely get some help throwing it up there. Don't hurt yourselves, it's not worth it. Quick recap of what we've done so far. We've got the pump, the belt, the res, and the box. Now the steering box snugged up to the frame, I'm going to go ahead and connect the steering shaft so I at least have that part done. So now I have the steering shaft connected to the box. I want to go ahead and I want to finish up at least the routing of the lines on the front of the engine between the radiator and the engine. I'm going to use the new supplied pressure line, and I'm also going to hook up the existing stock return line. I'm not sure if this kit came with the return line or not. It wasn't in the box, so I'm just going to go ahead and reuse it. And then I can go ahead and hook up the reservoir to pump line. And most of my lines should be assembled for at least the normal power steering system. So one thing, you can, I guess the kit comes with these little pressure clips that hold the line down. The factory one had these nice thick brackets that I was going to reuse, and I still might, to be honest with you. I think I like these better. So I'm going to go ahead and take these off the factory line, put it on the the pressure line from PSC, and not use these plastic things if I can help it. All right, the factory mounts are on there. The reason I chose these over the other things is that these actually have rubber isolators on them, so the shaking won't kind of, you know, put a lot of extra strain on the hose. So these are held in with two 8mm bolts on the cross member right underneath the radiator. So let's go ahead and throw those in. All right, so the pressure line from the pump all the way to the box is in. This side fought me like pretty much the whole time. It took me probably about 10 minutes to finally get it lined up perfect, and then it just threaded right in. I couldn't believe it. But I've seen some of these new lines go in perfect. First shot, no problem. The other ones are, you have to literally be perfect, like you're shooting torpedoes down the Death Star exhaust. Yeah, I'm nerding out there. So yeah, just be careful of that. Now we're gonna go ahead, I'm gonna put in the feed, or the gravity feed line from the res down to the pump. So after some fighting, I found out I had the adapter on the wrong side. So I had the adapter on this side prematurely, so basically I got discombobulated. So I actually had to 180 degree the hose, and it went in just fine. No crimps, no kinks, no real stress on the thing. One thing I did have to do, I loosened this, I twisted it, and I guess you're supposed to pull it as close to the headlight as possible, which I did. And what happened was I gained another 1/2 inch of space between the pump and the res, and then I have a much bigger gap here, so I can open this up no problem. So it worked. So just keep that in mind when you go to do this. Push it as close to the, like I almost kind of twisted it into the headlight, and I snugged it down nice and tight, and we're locked in pretty good. Next, what do we gotta do? I think we gotta do the cooler. Staples in front. All right. Pretty, very pretty. See here. Looks like we have some fittings here. So in my infinite wisdom, come to find out, we are not going to be using the factory return line after all, which I kind of knew, but I just didn't follow up. We're going to be using the cooler lines and the cooler as the return system, which is like, duh, I should have known that, but I guess maybe heat stroke set in, who knows. But I'm going to go back, rip the factory one out now, and then we'll work on the cooler. now that all that unpleasantness is over with, I'm going to go ahead and take the fitting for the steering box, throw that in, and this is tapered for the AN fitting for the cooler. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this in, then I can worry about running the lines for the cooler. Now, just something I kind of ran into, I don't know if y'all are going to run into this or not, this bumper, and it might just be this bumper and winch combo, but this bumper and winch combo was so against the grill of this. I don't know if you guys saw me fighting with this. I basically had to take the winch off just to give me barely enough clearance to get the grill off. So keep that in mind. I might try to help this person out and grind this down a little bit so the winch sits just a hair closer to the front, and then it gives you a little bit more space in the back to get the grill off. So let's get this installed and get that cooler run. So I'm going to take this one from the gearbox to the fluid cooler. On the back it also says hose clamps may need to be rotated accordingly to prevent rubbing on other hoses. I already see that I think I'm going to need to rotate this one ever so slightly. So now I'm at a point where I can go ahead and start trying to route the cooler. I think I'm supposed to go underneath here because the cooler has like a 45-degree down and turn. So I might cut out some of this area, and then route it to the prospective ways. So let's give that a shot. Okay, so we're like day 5 of a heat wave. It's hotter than hell. Last night I was about to finish up the plumbing on the entire system minus the hydro lines for the ram when I ran into an issue. PSC had put this fitting in the kit. Now this does thread up loosely in here. However, the line that's supposed to connect to this, this is way too small for the hose for the return from the cooler to the res. So I actually had to go out, pick up one locally, and this is what we're going to run with. So I'm going to go ahead, reinstall this because I took it with me to the store, as well as the hose to make sure I got the right fitting. So I'm going to go ahead and reinstall this, and I'll catch up with you guys in 1 second. So the plumbing for the normal power steering system is done. I'm going to go here ahead and mark these holes, center this the best I can, drill the holes all the way through the cross member, bolt this down. Then I can worry about putting the front grill back on, and the winch is going to be something completely different. I'll handle that off camera. Alright, so I kind of just placed the grill, I placed the winch, this is not bolted in, that's not bolted in. I want to actually get the system completed and cycling before I finalize everything. I want to make sure there's no leaks, and I want to be able to get to them quick. But now that the plumbing is pretty much done, minus the hydraulic ram lines, we get to do the fun stuff. So PSC has this really cool bracket that is kind of bolt-on. It's non-welded. that has the mount kind of built in. It kind of takes a lot of the thought process out of it. Normally I see a lot of guys, what they'll do is they'll just burn in the ram mount like right here where the stabilizer was, and that's actually kind of what we're doing. I'm going to remove the stabilizer bar here, the stabilizer bracket here. This comes off, this bolt comes out. This is like a main support for the track bar bracket. And then this sits flat on here, bolts in here, here, once underneath, and then has this clamp that goes around the back side of the axle here, somewhere right around this area, and locks everything down. So this is like a no weld bolt-in kit. So if you don't have access to a welder, or you're just a a DIYer trying to help yourself out and you don't have the access to the the big tools, you could do this. Let's go ahead, let's rip this bracket off, let's get this bolt out, and then let's get the fun stuff going. We're gonna get this nice shiny bracket mounted right here. So I contacted the customer and found out that this is not a factory track bar mount, and this bracket is designed to use a factory track bar mount. So I think I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to go ahead and mock up a template with some cardboard, find out what this face of this looks like. I'm going to transpose it onto here and cut this out for my needs. That way I can still bolt in. I have more surface area for the ram. I'm going to be able to burn across the top of here, and then I think I got to cut down a little bit here. I can burn that in as well, and then I'm going to cut short on the bottom of here and burn that into basically down here if I can do it. That way it gives me a little bit more surface area and a little bit more more holding power, and I don't have to hack up the axle or anything like that. So I think that's probably what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and transpose this to cardboard real quick and transpose it onto this and see what I'm working with. So after a little bit of deliberation, this is what I ended up with. So I cut the bracket down tremendously. I'm going to weld here, all the way around here, and then the front here. And it's also going to be bolted in all the way through. There should be enough meat on that bolt, plenty of meat on the back of that bolt to hold this in. So once I weld this in 1, 2, 3, 4 places, this thing should be perfectly fine. And if I really wanted to, I could probably jack the vehicle up and hit it from the back side as well. But I think that might be a little overkill. So I got it clamped into place, I'm gonna burn it into place, and then we can go ahead and hopefully finish this project up. So I got the bracket all welded up. Once it dries, I'm gonna paint it, clean it up a little bit. It's all buttoned down, so it should be good to go. All right, so I got lucky. The taper for the factory, or for the drag length that the customer has on the Jeep, matches the pitman arm. So we're golden there. I'm gonna go ahead and find the biggest wrench I can, tighten this up to the, I think, 280 or 260 ogas, like basically as tight as I can get it. And then I can run the lines, or at least start the lines for the Hydro Assist. I can get the track bar back up, get that squared away, because that's most likely not coming back out again. And then I can start running the lines to the cylinder. Good deal. So it just so happens I have a 1 7/8 socket. Now, the only really reason I have this 1 7/8 socket is that I used to build RX-7s back in the day, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is the size of the crank bolt on the main crankshaft. Or the, I forgot what they call it, it's been so many years. But, it's pretty darn close, so we're going to give this a shot. Alright. Woo-wee! Alright. Let's get those lines up there. Find these out here. Ooh. So the longer one goes to the passenger side. So this is my passenger side one. This one here that's closest to the firewall is the passenger side port. Looks like there's some O-rings here. I'm gonna have to go ahead and take a look at those in a second. But let's go, I'm gonna put the camera down and pull this port and see what's going on. So from here on in, I'm going to kind of jump around and jump through stuff pretty quickly because the customer is trying to go to AOAA this weekend, and I'm running out of days to get this done for him so he can make the trip. So, off camera, I attached the ram, the clamp, the ram to the freshly welded on clamp brackets. I put the lines in, however they're binding up, so I'm going to have to loosen them, clock them so that they're like nicely loosened. I got the track bar all backed up, snugged up. The drag link is up, but it's just threaded in a couple threads, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Then I also need to install the anti-splash reservoir, basically like the bleeder vent. And then I can start putting fluid in it, dry cycling everything, making sure there's no leaks. If everything goes good there, then I can go ahead and do the normal bleeding procedure prescribed by PSC. PSC. I never get that right. So I'm going to jump into a time lapse, and I apologize in advance, but this is going to be the only way I'm going to be able to get this thing done in time. Okay, as you can see, I'm not in the JK. I was able to give it back to the owner. It's not 1,000 degrees outside, thankfully for that. So, in conclusion, I say the PSC kit was pretty well worth it, because when the JK came in, it had 0 power steering, and now he could turn those 37s with ease. Basically the palm of his hand, no problem. I did the bleeding process, had no leaks, so I was able to give the vehicle back to him, and he was happy. So that's a win-win. Now, a couple of takeaways I got while installing this kit is I feel that maybe my homebrew kit, the homebrew Hydro Assist on the XJ, I need to increase the fluid capacity in terms of the system. Now, when I turn the wheel all the way to the left and extend the ram, I basically bleed almost all the fluid out of the reservoir and have very little left, which isn't a good thing. Now, if you're on an incline or off camber or something like that, I could potentially starve the pump. Another takeaway I feel might help with that capacity issue is I feel like I need a better cooler or a bigger cooler. Now, the heatsink style cooler that PSC runs has a ton of capacity into it. If you ever get your hands on one of these, take a look inside that cooler. There's a lot of fluid that gets stored in there. Whereas I have a finned, I think it's a Commander cooler. It's probably about almost 1.5 to 2 feet long, but it doesn't have the capacity that the heatsink one does. So I feel that getting that heat pulled out of my system and increasing fluid capacity might dramatically improve the performance of my XJ's homebrew Hydro Assist kit. Because after about an hour's time on the trail, especially with a lot of turning, the pump gets a little noisy, the pump gets a little sluggish, and I could tell that it's not liking life. So until I decide to go full hydro, I might look into making those improvements that I pulled from that PSC kit and apply it to mine. So once again, I just want to thank you for watching. I hope you guys got something out of this, and then we'll catch you on the next one.